Greetings, Lumen students. It is week 10. This is your Wednesday video. And the scene behind me is related to what we're going to read about in Roman history today. But I also want to give you an adjective challenge. I want you to describe the scene behind me using adjectives, and put your best adjective choices in our discussion board related to this background, okay? So kind of study it a little closely and then listen as I describe it to you. We're going to actually start with our history today so you can understand why I have chosen this scene. Augustus Caesar was a good emperor. His people loved him and his army obeyed him. His reign was a good time for Rome. But after Augustus Caesar died, Rome had other emperors who were not so good. And the worst emperor of all, I wanted to tell you about this too. They were cruel to their subjects. They got richer and richer and spent more money on themselves, while the people of Rome got poorer and poorer. The emperor of Rome was supposed to tell the army how to fight, but the emperors after Augustus Caesar were such bad generals that the army refused to obey them. One Roman emperor even made his horse a consul and told all the people of Rome to do whatever the horse said. The worst Roman emperor of all was named Nero. Nero had everyone who disagreed with him murdered. His favorite pastime was playing the lyre. He was a very bad lyre player, but everyone was afraid to tell him so. So they all praised his terrible music. When I die, Nero used to say, "What a loss I shall be to the art of music." And the Romans in the royal court all agreed with him because they were afraid for their lives. After Nero had been emperor of Rome for 10 years, he decided to take a vacation from Rome. He went out to his house in the country and invited his favorite friends to go with him. They had a party that went on for days and days, and meanwhile Rome was burning. The fire began late at night in a rickety wooden building in a dark and dirty Roman street. No one knows exactly how it started, but the 4 families who lived in that part of town often built small fires to keep warm. Perhaps a coal fell out of one of those fires onto the dry wooden floor. It smoldered away until the floorboard caught fire. The fire spread to a wall and then to an entire building, and then the flames leapt to the building next door. Soon a whole section of Rome was on fire. The fire roared along until it came up against a stone wall. The rich people of Rome had built the wall to keep fires from spreading into the wealthy part of town. But this fire was stronger than the wall. The flames leapt right over the wall and kept on burning. The people of Rome realized that this was the worst fire in Roman history, and they sent a messenger to tell Nero what was happening. The messenger galloped hard until he reached the country house where Nero and his friends were celebrating. "Your Majesty, your city is burning!" But Nero didn't even answer the messenger. He ordered him taken away before he ruined the party, and he didn't return to Rome for days more. When he finally did come back to Rome, he found his people waiting for him. Hundreds of families had been driven out of their homes. Everything they owned had been burned, and they were cold and hungry, and they begged Nero for help. "Remember your great ancestor, Augustus Caesar," they cried. "He gave money to every poor family in Rome. Surely you can help us out of your great wealth." But Nero ignored the poor and homeless families. Instead, he announced, "The fire has cleared away ugly broken down houses and left space for my new building projects. I will take the land where those houses used to stand and build myself a new and bigger palace." The people of Rome were furious. Soon Nero realized that he had made a mistake. The Romans were on the edge of rebelling and taking his throne away. He had to find someone to blame for the fire right away. "I know who set the fire," he told the Romans. "It was the Christians. They set the fire on purpose." Of course, the Christians hadn't set the fire, but many people believed Nero's lies, and the Romans began to persecute the Christians. Christians were arrested and executed. Some of them were forced to fight in gladiator shows. Others were killed by wild animals. Nero's cruelty to the Christians drew attention away from his own selfishness. So the Romans punished runaway slaves, criminals, and Christians by making them fight wild animals. But what was wrong with being a Christian? In the Roman Empire, it was a crime to be a Christian. And the Roman emperors kept control over their people by saying, "Obey us because we are gods." The emperors claimed to be descended from Jove, the king of the gods. Special feast days were held every year in honor of the emperors. And at these celebrations, all Romans were supposed to worship the emperor and promise to obey only him. Christians refused to do this. "We only worship our God," they told other Romans. "We refuse to bow down to someone who is only a man. The emperor is not God. We will pray for him, but we will not worship him." The Roman emperors were furious. If the Christians disobeyed them, other Romans might be brave enough to do the same. So the emperors ordered Christians arrested and put in jail. Many Christians were put in prison, and others were forced to fight lions. The Christians were frightened by this persecution, so they stopped holding their meetings in public. Instead, they dug underground passages beneath Rome and beneath other cities in the Roman Empire. They held their religious meetings in these underground passages in secret, and these passages were called catacombs. Down in the catacombs, the Christians also buried their dead. The underground tunnels were dark and damp. Stones lined the floors. They were lit only by torches. Shadows lurked in every corner. But when the Christians were underground, they were safe. The secrecy soon made people even more suspicious of the Christians. What were they doing down there underground? Rumors started to fly around. Maybe the Christians were calling down floods and famine on the rest of the Roman Empire. Maybe they were planning to overthrow the government. "We must wipe out this new and harmful religion," one Roman senator wrote. "Otherwise, Rome will cease to worship the emperor." Of course, the Christians weren't calling down famines or trying to overthrow the government. They were just meeting peacefully together to talk about Jesus and about his teachings. They protested to the emperors that they were doing nothing wrong. But the Roman emperors kept right on throwing them in jail. Soon Christians were even afraid to say to people they didn't know, "I'm a Christian." "Are you?" If they told the wrong person they were a Christian, they might end up in jail. So they decided on a secret symbol. It looked like a fish. When a Christian met someone she didn't know, she might draw a fish on a wall or in the sand at her feet or on the edge of a piece of paper. If the other person was a Christian too, he would draw a fish too. Then both Christians knew that it was safe to talk to each other. Today you can still see the catacombs that the Christians dug below the cities of the Roman Empire. Some of the catacombs have tombs of ancient Christians in them. Others have pictures that the Christians drew of Jesus. Archaeologists have found fish carved on the walls as well, secret messages that the Christians sent to each other. Hey, let me just show you, students, what that symbol looks like. And I think you're going to like that. So that was the fish symbol. I want to show you something cool about the fish that I just drew, something magical. I wrote it with a green dry erase marker, which you can't tell because the green screen cuts out the green. And so it's cutting out that symbol as well. And you can see instead what is behind it. Isn't that cool? I just thought I would show that to you. Hey, very interesting and horrible to think of Nero and what he had done. All right, let's play a spelling game. I don't have your homonyms behind me, and so I'm just relying on your memory and the fact that you've studied these words this week, right? To have you guess what word I'm talking about, okay? So I'm going to give you, we're going to make this a mind reader, and I'm thinking of just one word, but I'm going to give you 5 clues for that word, and they're going to be picture clues today, okay? Here is your first clue. It's somehow related to this. And this. It has the same beginning as this, and it has the same ending as this. It is the opposite, or it is not the opposite, but its homophone pair is this. Okay. It is not, but its homophone pair, or homonym pair, is this. Okay. You want to see those one more time? Okay. Okay. How many of you guessed that the mind reader word that I was thinking about was no? K-N-O-W. And its homonym pair is no. N-O. Okay, not at all. Awesome. Well, now you understand the pictures of the catacombs behind me represent the secret hiding place of Christians. I can think of several adjectives you could use to describe this background. So please put your adjective choices in the discussion board for this week, and I will choose my favorites. Okay, we've already done our history. We've already done our spelling activity. So the next thing that I need to do is just read to you in our 7 Wonders of the World of Sassafras Springs book. And this chapter is called Day 3, Disappointments. In 2 days, I had 2 wonders. It might have just been beginner's luck, but it looked like this wasn't going to be so hard after all. I'd be on a train soon, my first train ever, chugging away from Sassafras Springs. Or chugging away from St. Clair, since Sassafras Springs didn't even have a train station. St. Clair was where folks went for doctoring or banking or big deliveries like a new wagon or a stove that could only come by train. I'd been to St. Clair and it was a fine town, but it just made me hunger to see more. The next town and the next town. If the schoolhouse had been open, I could find the route to Colorado on a map. There'd be St. Clair, Pine Gap, Garvey City. I couldn't remember what came next. I'd know soon enough with just 5 more wonders to find, and then I'd be on my way to Colorado. Students, think about that sentence. Which homonym would you have used? I'd know soon enough. Okay. I hope the engineer wouldn't be stingy with the whistle. My aunt had other ideas about the trip, which she made clear that night on the porch. The rain hadn't amounted to more than a few drops, and it was as steamy as the jungles of Borneo, or at least I thought so. Cole McAllister, you're encouraging your son to risk his life, Aunt Pretty declared, as I finished writing down Coley's story. I told her and Pa that Jeb and I had gone to see him, but I didn't let on about Coley's wonder. He could have been buried by that collapsing house. But he wasn't, said Pa, unperturbed as usual. And when do you think Coley Pone at last had a bath? She asked. Poor dog could have gotten fleas from that man. Sal cocked her head. Aw, I was thinking of hiring him to do some work around here. Pa acted serious, but I could tell he was teasing. You can just think of someone else, my aunt replied. Her crochet hook was racing like greased lightning by then. That woman could crochet anything from a lowly dishcloth to a baby sweater that was soft as a cloud. If a person could crochet a wonder, she'd be the one to do it. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me at all to find a great pyramid sitting in her lap someday, crocheted in her favorite shades of pink and blue. That Friday was a scorcher from the minute the sun came up. I would pick the hottest day of the year to put up fruit. Aunt Pretty said the same thing every year. Sweet-smelling peaches simmered on the stove in one huge pot, while canning jars bubbled away in another pot. The kitchen was hot as an oven, and it was just as hot outside. Pa was already perspiring at 7 a.m. Do you think it might rain? I asked, though the cloudless sky didn't give much encouragement. Not today, said Pa. Aunt Pretty brought Pa and me lunch in the field that noon, but she didn't stay to eat with us. Still putting up peaches, she said. They probably don't even grow those in Colorado. Not that Molly was ever much of a cook. As I watched her march back to the house, I took a giant gulp of iced tea from the old stone jug. Pa, does Aunt Pretty have something against Aunt Molly? I asked. She never says anything good about her. Molly and Eli are good people, Eben. Pa took a swig of iced tea. Don't pay any mind to what Pretty says. It's just that she's had her share of sorrows, and she never got a husband of her own. How come? Plenty of women in Sassafras Springs who didn't have good looks or her good qualities had husbands. She had admirers, but she fancied Holt Nickerson, Pa recalled. He bought her apple pie at the church social after competing with 2 rivals for her attention. I never even heard of this Holt Nickerson before. What happened? Well, sir, Holt was raised by his aunt and uncle, the Culpeppers. His cousin Ned said Holt had quite a habit of sleepwalking. Said they never knew where he'd end up in the morning. Once they found him all curled up in the corn crib, and he had no idea how he'd even gotten there. Another time they found him leaning against the milk cow, sound asleep, both of them. One night, Ned heard somebody stirring outside. He hurried downstairs and got to the door just in time to see Holt jump on his horse and ride off in the moonlight, dressed in his long johns, boots, and a hat. Ned ran after him, and when he got a glimpse of Holt, he could tell he was asleep, with his eyes wide open. Didn't he ride after him? Of course he did. Ned rounded up the whole family. They searched high and low, but no one in Sassafras Springs ever saw hide nor hair of Holt again. I had to sit and think about that story for a bit. He rode off in his long johns, and he never came back? I asked. It was a scandal. Your Aunt Pretty pretended not to care, but I could tell she took it hard. I think she was sorry one of those other fellers didn't get her apple pie at the social. Pa paused to chew on some biscuit. And her best girlhood friend, Callie, she got herself married and moved to Oregon. Pretty hasn't seen her in years. She has a pack of children and hardly has time to even ride anymore. I suddenly thought of how I'd feel if something happened to Jed. To Jeb. What happened to those other fellows that liked Aunt Pretty? I wondered. Married other girls, sad to say. Now, even if you ever mention a word of this to your aunt, there'll be trouble for you. I promised I wouldn't, but it took a lot of weeding for me to get the picture of Holt Nickerson riding off in his long johns out of my mind. That afternoon, Pa told me I could leave a while as long as I came back with a sack of sugar for Aunt Pretty by supper time, and 2 dozen clothespins, too. That woman really went through clothespins in a hurry. Sometimes I thought she must chew them like lollipops. My first stop, though, was to drop by Jeb's place to see if he wanted to go searching for wonders again. I got to work. Jeb plopped down on the ground next to the potatoes. Charlie and Bessie were doing somersaults while Joey squashed tomato worms as fast as Flo and Fred could pick them off the vines. You're a lucky dog to get so much time off, Jeb told me. Time off? I just worked so fast I finished early. Sometimes that Jeb could get under my skin. Pa said I looked like a cyclone tearing through the fields, and Aunt Pretty said I must have swallowed my lunch whole so I could get out of there. I don't see why you're so fired up about this wonder thing, Jeb said. You're never really going to see those faraway places. Sure I am. Remember that book by Hardy T. Lang that Miss Collins brought in from the lending library in St. Clair? He's that fellow who traveled to all those far-off places, living in jungles with the natives and finding lost temples and sailing on junks and such. Junks? Chinese boats, I explained. Remember the pictures in his book? Sometimes I wonder if Jeb paid a lick of attention to the teacher. Jeb sat back and stuck a long blade of grass between his teeth. That's okay for somebody in a book, but real folks don't do things like that. Hardy T. Lang was a real person. I saw his picture. You did too. I'm tired, whined Bess, trying to climb on Jeb's back. You got any candy, even? Asked Flo. Leave us alone, you little beggar. Jeb shooed his sister away and then chewed on his piece of grass a while before he said, Must be kind of lonely out there in the world not knowing anybody. And if you do meet somebody, they don't speak the same language. If you and I went together, we'd speak the same language. Jeb lay back in the grass and stared up at the sky. I don't know, even. My folks are counting on me to take over the farm someday. Doesn't matter so much for you. You don't have any brothers or sisters. Maybe your pa wants to sell the farm, so we won't need you anyway. He turned on his side, facing toward me. Maybe I'll go on an adventure with you sometime, but if I do, I'm coming back here. I know Jeb never meant any harm, but his words stung me like a bee. It wasn't my fault I didn't have brothers and sisters. And Pa never mentioned he wanted to sell the farm. He needed me plenty. Hadn't I worked my tail off for him all morning? I've already had enough weeding and plowing to last a lifetime, haven't you? I asked. All Jeb said was, Those natives, they must be dangerous. They have poison darts. I guess he remembered the book after all. I've dealt with Orville Payne and Cully Pone, I told him. I don't think a few natives will bother me any more than them. I stood up. To tell the truth, I was disappointed with Jeb. It would have been fun to see the world with him. But if I was going to find wonders, it appeared I was going to have to find them alone. In Greece, or Africa, or even Sassafras Springs. See you later, asked Jeb. Yep, I said. Come on, Sal, I told the dog. Let's go searching. Day 3. Continued difficulties and discoveries. Well, what did you think about that? The story about the man sleepwalking. That was crazy. Good luck, students, in your adjective challenge. And I'll be back with a more appropriate background tomorrow. Thank you.